Time now for a closer look at some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Auditor John Dougall and House Minority Leader Brian King. Gentlemen, great to have both of you on the show. Thanks for being here with us.
Good to be with you.
Glenn.
Let's start off with the race for Senate. We are now less than 2 months away from Decision Day. Evan McMullen, the independent candidate in the race, hosting a town hall during the week on Wednesday in which former RNC Chair Michael Still was a guest. Also, former Congressman Ben McAdams, among others. Representative, let's start with you. How is this playing out for the challenger in this race as he tries to appeal to people from multiple parties?
It's a fascinating dynamic. Evan McMullen is trying to thread a needle here. He's trying to appeal to moderate Republicans, to the kind of Republicans that support Mitt Romney in Utah, as well as independents and Democrats. And I think his success, and he has a decent chance of success. I mean, I call him the underdog, but I still think that he has a very good chance at upending Lee. And he's got to have strong support from Democrats. He's got to have a good turnout from independents, and he's got to have support from that moderate, pragmatic group of Republican voters who just can't stomach the kind of conservative Republicans that Donald Trump appeals to.
John, let's bring you in. Will Republicans be willing to cross the party line and vote for an independent in this race?
I think it's difficult for two reasons. First of all, Mike Lee has postured this race. It's between Mike Lee and Joe Biden, and whose vision is better. And where a lot of Republicans have a lot of concern with Joe Biden and his vision for America. So that's one of those challenges. The other thing is Evan McMullen has to prove that he can actually do something in the Senate. He says he's going to be independent. He's not going to caucus with either party, which for a lot of folks, they're wondering, well, does that mean you're actually going to be able to get anything done?
All right. Representative, let's dig into that a little bit more. You talk about you think it's possible here, but a lot of insiders take a look at this race and they have a really hard time jumping from a reliably red state that Utah has been for so long to going independent. So how do you see that? What would be a key of making that happen?
Well, John Dougall just gives us one, which is how do people in Utah feel about Joe Biden? As Joe Biden's approval numbers increase incrementally over the country and in Utah to some degree, you're going to find more and more people who find that the partisan dichotomy that Senator Lee is setting up as Lee versus Biden becomes less compelling. That was a better line for Lee about 2 or 3 months ago when we have gas prices through the roof and we don't have the Democrats in Congress accomplishing anything that working people in Utah can say helps them. But now that we've seen inflation tamed a little bit, at least on the gas front, and we've seen Democrats in Congress come up with bills that have addressed some of the problems that working Utahns, day-to-day problems that they face, such as healthcare costs and inflation and infrastructure, things like that. I think that they're going to be looking a little harder at the possibility of, well, let's go ahead and go with Evan McMullen.
John, address that. Do you think Utahns are starting to come around as, I mean, prices are still really high, but they have come down some recently? There's
going to be a few that on the margins are going to look and say, okay, it's a little bit better than a few months ago, just like Brian said. But overall, gas prices are still high. The cost of food is still high. People are still concerned about the economy. And we just saw the president just a few days ago basically poke a bunch of Republicans in the eye and have as much contempt as Trump has for politics.
That was actually a very fascinating dynamic we saw play out during the week. In fact, we ran a story on that very issue in the block before you two gentlemen came on. This back and forth between President Biden and former President Trump. Representative, do you see that being successful in any way when the president comes out and calls the former president and his supporters the enemy of the state?
Well, I think that when you see more and more information coming to light about just what the former president was up to in terms of taking national security documents, top secret documents, and keeping them at his own home, trying to hide them basically from investigators who were looking for them. And then there are questions about why he was doing so. Was he trying to line his own pockets by selling state secrets about the nuclear capacity of other countries to countries that were enemies of those countries that had the state secrets? Those are all the kinds of questions that I think call into question whether, in fact, today's Republican Party, who is led, quite honestly, by Donald Trump, is the kind of force politically that we want in power, that we want to retain power for, and that there's doubt in people's minds about whether, in fact, the Republican Party today is fundamentally committed to the kind of government that we've honored for over 200 years. A democratic republic that lives by its constitutional principles, believes in a peaceful transition of power. It's becoming more and more clear that Donald Trump, at least, and his followers are not committed to that. And I think what Joe Biden is doing is calling it out. He's calling the reality of that situation, saying, hey, let's be honest. Let's face what we're dealing with here, and let's address it in the way that is going to be most likely to save our country.
All right, John, your thoughts on that and the impact it could potentially have as we come across the finish line? Well,
the simple fact is the president clearly wants to make this race between him and Trump. I think for a lot of Utah Republicans, they've kind of moved past. Trump symbolizes a system that's been stacked against them. And if we're talking about concerns about folks, we have examples on both sides of the aisle of people saying that election's illegitimate or that Supreme Court's illegitimate, on and on and on. We've got various problems on both sides of the aisle when it comes to people tearing down the Constitution, tearing down our government. And we all individually need to fight to preserve that Constitution.
Okay, this is a crucial midterm when you take a look at the makeup of both the House and Senate, razor thin margin in the Senate, and very thin in the House as well. What's at stake, Representative, as we come down to this midterm election? Oh,
it's tremendously important that you're going to see a lot change if Republicans take over the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate. If they take over the U.S. Senate, there are going to be no more judicial nominations that move forward. They'll just stop dead in their tracks. That's what our majority leader, the future majority leader, if that's the situation, Mitch McConnell, would make sure happened, is that those nominations from Joe Biden would go nowhere. If you see the Republicans rather take over the House, I think you're still going to see a lot of work on the part of those leaders in the House for the Republicans trying to investigate Joe Biden. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see them drop articles of impeachment against Joe Biden. If the Democrats are able to retain power, you're going to see a federal government that's able to continue to accomplish things as they have the last few weeks and months that benefit and address directly the problems that Utahns and the people in the United States of America are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. I think it's critically important that Utahns understand that and that they go out and vote accordingly to make sure that we move forward in a productive, positive way to address the people's needs.
John, the balance of power up for grabs. What's at stake as we go down these last few weeks?
Well, what's at stake is trying to fight against the president, ramrodding all sorts of agendas down the American people's throat. Government is getting too involved in people's lives, everyday lives, way too expansive, and so we want to see Senator Lee and others fight against that. We want that freedom and liberty for the everyday American, and we don't want government having a heavy hand picking winners and losers and driving up the national debt.
Okay, we just went through a redistricting process. Your colleagues up for election in the House this year as well, Representative. Only 17 members of your caucus, a major minority there, and in the Senate only 6. How do you see the redistricting process impacting the upcoming makeup of next year's legislature?
Well, the redistricting process that we went through last year was something that certainly realigned things in a way that generally was more helpful for Republicans than Democrats. It had a tendency to make blue Democratic seats safer and make red Republican seats safer, and for a few swing districts had a tendency to move them more to be competitive in a way that favors Republicans. But I do think that you're going to see some close races, some swing districts. Representative Rosemary Lesser up in Ogden is in a tight fight, but I think she's going to come out okay on that. We've got Jim Dunnigan and Lynette Wendell fighting it out here in Salt Lake County. We've got Claire Collard fighting it out over in Magna, Liz Waite fighting it out in West Valley. These are all people who are incumbents and that are sitting in swing districts right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that on the whole, you've seen some real changes in the last couple of months. I think the Dobbs decision, quite honestly, was going to be is going to be helpful because it makes people realize we don't want elected officials sitting in the legislature to make the decisions about the most private personal matters that we have in our lives.
Okay, real quick, we're running out of time, but I want to give John an opportunity to assess what we could see in the legislature.
As you mentioned, the Democrats are a very small minority of the legislature. I think you may see Republicans pick up a seat, maybe lose a seat. It's right on the margin there. It all depends what shakes out in the next couple months.
All right, and we will be following that. Gentlemen, appreciate your insight. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to be with you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more.